All right, so the task at hand here is I'm mowing the banks of the pond, and you can see here what I was doing when I first started. I was backing the tractor in and setting the brush hog down, and it just kind of makes a mess. It's not real precise. You know, you might have the blade hitting up here and you're cutting the grass off down there, but it makes kind of a mess. So I'm gonna have to rake some of this back in. And I got to thinking, this actually used to work fine when I had my 5-footer. And I think it's just because this one's a little bit bigger. It's kind of a little bit more awkward in off-camber situations like this. But I got to thinking, if I take the 3-point arms and offset them all the way to the one side, maybe this thing will swing out far enough to mow if I stay up on the outside edge of the pond. And so far, this little 25-foot section that I've done, it's actually worked pretty well. So I'm going to try and get around most of the pond like that. There might be a few spots where I actually have to back up like I first started doing, you know, if it's real steep on the edge of the bank there. But so far it's working pretty good. So I'm going to keep going doing like that. You can see my pond doesn't drop off real fast. So if I get one wheel in there, I'm not likely to roll the tractor, but it does make you nervous. I mean, it'd make me nervous even if you weren't going to end up in a pond. So I'm just trying to be as safe as possible here. But I do this probably twice a year. I've not put any chemicals in this pond. The previous owner of the house here did not put any chemicals in the pond, and I'd like to keep it that way as long as possible. I know a lot of people put the copper sulfate in, and that kills the weeds like a little bit right up the shore, and you really don't have to mess with this. But I swim in there all the time, and I'd just rather not put any chemicals in for myself and the fish unless I really need to. So you know, if the weeds started getting taken over real bad, I'd probably put something in just to get it back under control. But that's kind of a last resort. So anyway, let's kind of mow around the edge here and see how close we can get to knocking all these weeds over. And like I said, I'm sure there'll be a few spots I can't get to like this, but we'll do our best. brush hog blade I broke off last year on my old brush hog right there. I had to grab that when I'm done. So that worked pretty good. I got most of that whole one side from just straddling that bank from the yard to the pond. This end I usually leave some weeds. There's a swamp kind of that feeds through here, and that swamp filters, or the weeds filter a lot of the nasty stuff that's in that swamp, like algae and everything like that. And the weeds actually are really good. If you didn't have any weeds in your pond, what can happen is you'll get, you know, biomass builds up and nitrogen ends up building up, and you can get an algae bloom on your pond if you don't have the weeds to use some of those nutrients, pull some of those nutrients out of the water. You get an excess of nitrogen, and that's what causes the algae blooms. The Finger Lakes here are starting to experience that. A lot of people think it's from all the agriculture, which it very well could be. You know, all the nitrogen, the fertilizers they're putting on the grapevines and vineyards and stuff like that, and just general agriculture uses a lot of synthetic fertilizers, and that washes off the hilltops and into the lakes and ponds and everything else, and you end up getting a pretty nasty algae bloom, and you wouldn't want to swim in here or have your pets in here if that was the case. So anyway, I just like to knock the weeds back, and I'm going to go down this other side over here, and we'll see how that works, and I'll bring you back when we're all done. So that looks really good. There's a couple spots here by the dock I probably could get. I'll actually probably try to get that right now, but over here along that bank, that drops off pretty steep right at the edge of the water. So I didn't dare get too close, because if I would have dropped a wheel or both wheels over, I'd be afraid I'd end up upside down. Same thing with that little spot there. But overall, I mean, that saved a ton of time. I have probably 10 minutes into this, and I could easily finish up these few spots with a weed eater in, 10 minutes or so. So it used to take me at least an hour to work all the way around, at least an hour, probably closer to an hour and a half with the 5-foot brush hog. And like I said, I'd pull ahead and I'd back up and I'd set the brush hog down on the weeds. And it worked. I'd certainly do it again that way before I trimmed everything by hand or with a weed eater, but this just makes it so much easier. So obviously you got to have a brush hog that's about as wide as your tractor, or wider would be even better. This is a 7-footer, and it's just outside each of the rear tires when you've got it straight behind you. And then when I offset it, it probably sticks out in the back here, I'd say easily a foot, if not 16 inches. So yeah, that worked pretty nice. Very happy with that. So what I'll do now is, I don't know if I'll do it right now, I got a birthday party to go to, but a lot of times I'll take and just rake some of this bigger grass out, just so it's not sitting in here and getting nasty. And then the little stuff that you can't rake out, or just stuff that you don't get, I've got 2 grass carp in here, and they'll come along and they'll eat it eventually, or it'll just kind of degrade and sink to the bottom and become biomass. But it'll look a lot better. I'll show you around when I get this all cleaned up, and you can see just what it looks like. Message in a bottle. Says Labatt Blue Light. Muskrat? Must be. So that's pretty much it. I got one little tiny spot over there to finish and one little tiny spot down by that willow that's growing up. But it's pretty much the finished project, and kind of looks a little crappy now with all the grass that flies in there, but by tomorrow afternoon 90% of that will either sink to the bottom and you won't see it, or grass carp will come along and eat it. So looks pretty good. Looks a lot better than having all those weeds grow up, and they grow up pretty fast. Like I said, I'll do this another time this year, probably August, September time frame. But you know, it'll start looking pretty nice. They'll all be about that high in a few weeks, and it'll just look nice and uniform. You'll be able to throw your line over them and fish and do whatever anywhere around the pond. But I don't know, I just like the look of it a little bit better this way. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you on the next one. Very happy with that brush hog result. So thanks for watching.